Hello, I'm Harley Schlanger with the Schiller Institute. Welcome to our webcast with our founder and chairman, Helga Zepp LaRouche. Today is June 17th, 2020. It's fair to say that the strategic situation and the crisis is deepening everywhere in the world on every front, from the corona pandemic to the economic crisis, the social chaos, and the war danger. It's a crisis that demands a response. And so the Schiller Institute today is conducting an International Day of Action around the program for 1.5 billion new productive jobs and the demand for a four-power summit. Helga, what can you say about this Day of Action today, how it's going, and what you expect to come from it?
Well, it is very exciting because what we are doing today is an international day of action, which primarily consists out of young people in many countries in the world being mobilized for this idea that each country must have a national health system on the standard of, either the Hill-Burton standard in the United States or the excellent medical standard demonstrated in Wuhan. So you have young people from Peru, Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, the United States, many African countries, several European countries. And what they all are doing is they are contacting more people around the idea that their respective governments must join the chorus to demand that the international community is getting into an emergency mode to build up a national health system in every country. And these are young people who have started to study in a very serious way the economic theory of my late husband, Lyndon LaRouche, physical economy. They study, what is the real source of wealth, namely not money, but the increase of the productivity of the labor force. And they are studying classical music because this is absolutely important for the creative mentation to develop. And today, they are contacting literally hundreds and hundreds of institutions, other youth organizations. And the basic idea is that, given the fact that this emergency is escalating, you have the pandemic, you have the famine as a, result of the pandemic becoming a real crisis point, that basically we are trying to get some action. We know what to do. We know what the government should be doing, namely to organize emergency teams of medical personnel supplied with medical protection gear, with medicines, to actually go into all of these countries and start training programs for young people. So we are discussing this with doctors in the United States and in Europe. And the idea is that we organize, with the young people in Africa, in Latin America, to contact institutions so that such training programs could be set up in the short term. I think the idea that young people start to take responsibility and the action in their own hands, so to speak, to get this going, what governments should be doing, is actually very, very exciting. And the young people from different countries have made actually a very incredibly good little video, which we will put up on this website. And you should help to spread that little video to get the idea going that we have an international youth movement, which is indeed starting to get the ball rolling. Spread this video and the petition for a world health system in all possible channels you can reach, and get on board, because we need an emergency mobilization, because this pandemic is exactly what we knew it would become. It is expanding, it's reaching now the global south, and we count on you to be part of this mobilization.
I think one of the things that's exciting a lot of the youth, especially in poorer countries, is the idea that it is international, that it does include people from all over the world, and that we're not taking anything for granted, that any country, just because it's poor, should have to go through high death rate, famine, and things of that sort. Now, one of the things that's occurred in the last couple of days is the recurrence of a coronavirus in China, an outbreak in Beijing. What do you have on that, Helga?
Yeah, this is very worrisome because it seems that the outbreak in Beijing is a new strain. It's not the same one like Wuhan. It looks more similar to the kind of coronavirus strain which exists in Europe. And suspicions are that it came from the packaging of cool, deep cool, frozen food, salmons from Norway, which is being investigated now high speed. Beijing has quarantined off more than 20 neighborhoods. They have canceled 1,200 flights in and out of Beijing. And, this is actually, according to some doctors from China, more aggressive than the version of Wuhan. But obviously, this is just one example. You have a spike in many American countries in such a way that, for example, in Texas, in Houston, four hospitals had to turn away ambulances. It's a very difficult climate because, especially when President Trump now wants to have these big rallies, this is a very, very acute situation. Then, if you look at the pictures in the global south, the World Health Organization has warned that it is now absolutely on an uptick there. The situation in Brazil is horrendous. They had 37,000 new cases in one day, and that is only a guessing because the testing is very underdeveloped. Then in Lima, in Peru, the Archbishop of Lima had an incredible demonstration to make sure that people understand that each single life is a tremendous loss. So what they did in the Cathedral of Lima, they took pictures of 5,000 of the more than 6,000 people who have died in Peru already, and they put these pictures on the seats in the church, in the cathedral. So it looks like, all the pictures of the dead people are sitting there in these seats in the church. Then naturally you have a situation where in the richly populated countries like India, the situation is actually undergoing triage, not so much as a result of any decision, but just as a pure uh, lack of enough hospital beds, lack of enough protective measures, or clothes and masks and so forth, ICU beds. And a similar situation is now happening in many other countries in Africa. So this is exactly why we are making such an emergency mobilization to really start to treat this pandemic in the way it must be treated, as something which, until a vaccine is found, it may take a year, it may take more than that, and it will cost a lot of life, because in the developing sector it meets conditions where people are working in the so-called informal economy, which means that any lockdown immediately threatens their life. You have the immediate danger of a famine, which the World Food Programme is warning against again and again, and it's not getting the kind of coverage in the mainstream media which you would think it get, namely, to address the agricultural crisis, to double the food production. And that is why our mobilization is so absolutely crucial, and why you should join it. And that will be also the subject of an upcoming conference of the Schiller Institute on the 27th of June. So you should register for that conference to be able to participate in an active way. And you should spread the news, because we are trying to mobilize an international alliance to really turn this situation around through the implementation of the kinds of programs which we discussed already, the World Health System in every country, the 1.5 billion creation of productive jobs. And, that will all be a subject of this conference. And we will bring again international speakers to make clear that there is this kind of dialogue and spread of this alliance, which is absolutely needed.
One thing I think that very few people in the United States are aware of is this famine crisis, the famine pandemic, as it's being called, because it's even hitting the United States. And again, it's not getting a lot of coverage, but the food processing, especially meat processing, is collapsing because the coronavirus combined with the poor prices that are being paid to farmers. We're seeing farmers on the march worldwide. Do you expect that we'll have some farm participation in the Day of Action and also with the Schiller Conference on June 27th?
Yes, and if you really want to see farmers in action together with people who are responsible for the cities and urban life, you should also visit the LPAC meeting, the Manhattan meeting this coming Saturday, where farm leaders from the United States and urban leaders are actually discussing, and we are trying to spread this mobilization. The question of the hunger crisis, the pandemic, that will be the second panel of this conference on the 27th. And also we will have speakers from the developing countries, from Africa, from Latin America. And this is really important, because this is not something which can be solved in any one country, but we have to get the kind of international cooperation to really change the agenda and implement a completely different economic system, one which is not devoted to profit making, but to the real common good of the population.
Well, one area where this is being addressed is a summit that's taking place now between China and African nations. What can you tell us about the China-Africa summit?
I think this is very important, because today there is a meeting which involves Xi Jinping, the leaders of the African Union, the UN General Secretary Guterres, the head of the World Health Organization, and they are trying to get a handle on this incredible situation, because you have, as you mentioned already, not only the pandemic spreading, but the famine. And there are areas in Africa where you have a horrible combination of drought for longer decades already. Then you have the locust plague, which is now really destroying the food of 50,000 people a day or more. And obviously, you need the kind of cooperation. So it's good that China and the African Union are working together. And one can only hope that the United States and European countries would just join efforts, because the need is bigger than even if you mobilize all the industrial and agricultural capabilities of the so-called advanced countries. It is not enough to really address this problem in the necessary time.
Now, one of the other interesting developments is the China Belt and Road Initiative Conference, which is also taking place. There have been efforts to derail the Belt and Road Initiative. There's talk from some of the anti-China people that, well, China can't afford it now. They're collapsing. Their economy's going down. What's the reality around that?
Well, I think that that China is resuming the Belt and Road discussion. As you know, there is a part of it is the health Silk Road, but also the kinds of projects which are absolutely a precondition for the sustainable development, which is infrastructure. And China is returning to an emphasis on great projects. Now, I just want to say this, these people who are involved in this anti-China campaign, like there is this new international parliamentarian alliance which has such people as Marco Rubio and Senator Menendez and this Greenie politician from the Greens in Germany, Bütikofer. I mean, this is incredible because Bütikofer, who is now a co-chair of this alliance, which allies with the worst kind of anti-China, anti-Russia hawks in the United States. This guy in particular, he used to be when he was younger. Now he's, he has grown in age and also size quite significantly. When he was younger, he was a member of something called the KBW, which was the Maoist organization in Germany. And he even was the head of the German Chinese society. But that was at a time when China was undergoing the Cultural Revolution. So as everybody knows, China has completely turned away from that paradigm. And with the economic reforms of Deng Xiaoping has started an economic development path, which is very much similar to the American system of economy. The German economist Friedrich List is very famous in China, and that method has proven to be absolutely successful, as it has been everywhere it was ever evoked in history, in the United States, in Germany, in Russia. Whenever these principles were applied, they worked. China could uplift 850 million people from poverty, and they are intending, despite the pandemic, to end poverty this year. Now, obviously, that is the problem, that the West, at least those parts in Europe, in Germany, and other European countries, and the Democratic Party in the United States, for that matter, who still are on that paradigm of the Cultural Revolution, no, they are opposed to China simply for reasons, which have to do with the absolute anti-technology, anti-science attitude, and they end up in the war faction, in the oligarchical faction. So I think people should really stop to be so absolutely immoral. I mean, this is not the time to keep geopolitical games. This is the time to join hands and address the issues of all of humanity. And this anti-China campaign and the anti-Russia campaign are really contributing to a very unstable strategic climate and an actual existing danger of war. People tend to forget that, but I think that war danger is absolutely there.
One of the interesting developments of the last week was the discussion that President Trump and Vladimir Putin had, which was then followed up by, I think, two interesting events. President Trump's address at West Point to the graduating cadets, where he said, "We are ending the era of regime change wars, of endless wars." And he spoke about the fact that he's not going to continue this policy anymore. And then almost at the same time, President Putin reiterated his point that the reason people are out are making up fairy tales about Trump and Russia was to stop Trump and to tie him up and prevent him from moving toward a cooperative relationship. How does this fit in with the overall picture of fighting against geopolitics?
Well, I think it is very significant that Putin, who, if people remember, already in 2016, when Trump won the election, warned that his opponents would try a Maidan kind of a coup against his administration, referring to the coup in Kiev in 2014. And he also attributed the present uh, social riots in the United States to that, campaign against Trump, that contributed to these riots. So I think this is very significant because it again and again proves that leaders in Russia and China are quite aware of, both the coup and also the reasons why this coup is being made, and obviously by implications that there is a difference between Trump and some of his hawkish cabinet members. So I think this is very important because, the issue still is, can the largest countries of the world, the US, Russia, China, can they cooperate? Uh, or will the efforts to, cause provocations and, even proxy wars, can that can that be controlled? And can these leaders in time come together to establish the necessary cooperation to address this crisis, which is what the Schiller Institute is demanding, that we have a summit of Putin, Xi Jinping, and President Trump to address these world problems. Now, the danger of war is very big. The Swedish Strategic Institute, SIPRI, just said, that the number of warheads, of nuclear warheads, is slightly decreasing. I mean, the Russians have still more than 6,000 warheads. The United States has almost 6,000 warheads, and that is plenty enough to wipe out the human race 10 times over if these weapons would be ever used. But as we know, there are also people who think about winning a first strike, which the Russians have made very clear they will absolutely never allow to happen, and they have their counter weapons, hypersonic weapons, to match that. So in a few days, on the 24th of June, there will be the big military parade in Moscow. This will be the delayed parade for the end of World War II, which could not take place in May. And this will only be, transmitted by TV. So, the masses of people are not attending, but there are many TV crowds, and they will, as the announcers already said, have a better view than if they would be physically there, because these many TV teams will show airborne units. They will show the military hardware. So people should watch this parade and remember that it commemorates the end of World War II, and it should be a warning never to entertain the idea of a world war again. And that is a very real danger.
Well, you've brought up a couple of times the growing war danger. We see some of these hotspots, for example, developments in North Korea, the blowing up of the liaison station between North and South. We see the famine and the chaos in Syria, the terrible civil war in Libya. All three of these situations are a result of the regime change crowd in the West, in the transatlantic region, and the sanctions policy. How do you resolve something like that? This should be a topic of the Great Power Summit?
Well, I think under conditions of a pandemic, all the sanctions should be lifted right away, because it obviously prevents these countries from addressing the medical emergency. Uh, most of these countries are already not very developed and not very rich. So in the case of North Korea, I think the fact that there was no follow-up in terms of loosening the sanctions after the discussions between President Trump and President Kim Jong-un is for sure the big reason, whatever other little provocations may have been going on there. So now North Korea is moving the military to a tourist area in North Korea, and also to the industrial zone of Kaesong. And, as you said, they blew up this building in the demilitarized zone. So I think they are also, I'm pretty sure that people, Kim Jong-sung and others, are watching the anti-China campaign coming from the United States and Great Britain. And given the strategic location of North Korea, they probably draw their own conclusions out of that. So you can actually see how this anti-China campaign has all kinds of secondary aspects. In the case of Syria, it is quite obvious that, with Trump trying to pull troops out of Syria and not quite succeeding, because the obvious military leaders in the United States are not exactly following Trump's orders, but there is clearly also an attempt now to move in the direction of regime change against Syria through famine, which I find, rather disgusting. And the sanctions should be lifted, and anybody, including the EU, who is still supporting these sanctions, should really, be confronted with that inhuman behavior. And naturally, the case of Libya is a typical case of a proxy war, minimum between Turkey and and Egypt, and it involves Turkey and Italy. And it is a very dangerous situation, because it involves eventually tensions between the NATO and Russia. So I think that all these hotspots clearly could only be resolved if you have the kind of international cooperation among the large powers, because there are proxy crises which are the derivative of the tensions in the large picture.
Now, one other area of flare-up in a way is the U.S.-German relations, which seem to be going on a slightly bumpy road in the last few years, but have now escalated with this threat of sanctions against German companies and the German government around the Nord Stream pipeline. Where is this headed?
Well, this is incredibly serious. Ted Cruz apparently is preparing a bill in the Senate to have sanctions not only against oil firms in Germany and Europe who are working together to finish the last 150 or so kilometers of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, but also, there is the threat of sanctions against institutions of the German state. Now, I mean, this is incredible. First of all, it's the sovereign right of Germany to import its energy from whoever it wants. Secondly, there is a complete upsurge, not just among left politicians, but from the CDU, CSU, and SPD and so forth, and not only because of the Nord Stream, but also, there for weeks there was the discussion that the US wants to pull out 9,500 troops from Germany to reduce it to only 25,000 troops. And what upset people was not just that that is being mooted. I don't think everybody is much concerned about that. But the way it was done, that you don't inform your supposed partner, and that they have to find it out from the media. This is causing a big uproar among the entire spectrum of politicians. You have the Linkspartei and SPD's faction leader who say the United States should not only withdraw their troops entirely, but also take their nuclear weapons with them. Others, including a professor from the Academy of the German Army, is basically saying that there is no threat from Russia to NATO. There is no intention for Russia to attack NATO. So the reason why these US troops are there is not to protect Germany, but to protect the strategic interest of the United States, because after all, Germany is used as a launching pad for drones and other operations into the Middle East, into Africa. And the German ambassador to Washington also very clearly said these troops are not there to protect Germany. So there is quite, an upsetness, and this professor from this Bundeswehr German Army University said that since a while, and escalated in the last period, there is a drifting away of interest in all areas between the United States and Germany. Now, I find that quite incredible. And well, what is that supposed to mean? I think this is, if that leads to a situation where the EU thinks they have to build their own army, to build a bloc against China and against the United States. This is the kind of geopolitical dynamic which I think is exactly what contributes to world wars. If you look at the long arc, it's these kinds of things which have very negative effects. I think the solution is not sanctions against the auto sector, against forcing the EU to get rid of the import tariffs for lobsters. All of these things are so absolutely secondary. I think Germany and the United States should work together to solve the problems of the refugee crisis, the building up of Southwest Asia, the solving of the pandemic, working together to industrialize Africa. I mean, these are the kinds of things we should put our minds together. And, I really think that, we have to have a different paradigm and a completely different thinking, because national interest is fine. I'm all for national interest, including that of Germany. But as Friedrich Schiller has said many times, you cannot have a national interest which is in contradiction to the interest of humanity. Therefore, you have to be a patriot and you have to be a world citizen at the same time. So that is the kind of spirit which the Schiller Institute is trying to evoke. That will be the subject of our upcoming conference on the 27th of June, which you should absolutely join and listen to and participate in. And, that is really extremely urgent.
Well, as we said at the beginning of the program, these crises are deepening. Thank you for for explaining that and showing that. And again, there is a day of action today and a conference coming up on June 27th of the Schiller Institute, which will be online, so it's available to everyone. Any final words on giving people the impetus to take part now?
Well, I think the best thing is if you look at this little video which shows you people, young people from Yemen, from Africa, from Colombia, from Mexico. And if you see that these young people are fighting to get a world health system, that is the hope. This is the future is theirs. And the best we can do is, to give all support that their efforts are succeeding. So join our mobilization, because it is the most promising vehicle to really get a change in the world picture. And I'm quite optimistic, that given the multitude of the crises and the fact that more and more people and countries are really understanding that we need a new paradigm, I would not be surprised if we cannot move governments at large, including the United States, Russia, China, and many others, to implement our program, the 1.5 billion jobs which need to be created, because that is the only way how we will stop the pandemic and the famine. So join this effort.
Well, thank you very much, Helga, and we'll see you again next week.
Till next week.